Hello, my friends. I wanted to jump on and tell you that enrollment is now open for our Unicorn Society group. For those of you who don't know what Unicorn Society is, it's our Business for Unicorns coaching group for training gym owners. It's an amazing group of humans. I'm obsessed with these folks. So many people who have been in Unicorn Society have been in it for many years now. So that just tells you how much people enjoy being in the group. But briefly, what you get in the group is you get pretty much unlimited access to me and Mark and Pete Dupuis as your coaches, up to 90 minutes per month of one-on-one time with us, plus kind of unlimited emails, texts, plus a ton of other things. I could spend 10 minutes talking about it, but we do retreats. Every quarter we have a 2-day retreat that you can attend in person or remotely. You get access to Unicorn University, all of our online courses. We have a content library with endless tools and tips and scripts and templates. You also have Zoom meetings with a group, our cohort from Unicorn Society that you talk to every other week or every week if you want to. And so the whole thing is that this group is meant to be your support system, your executive board of directors to help you both personally and professionally make decisions and navigate running a brick and mortar training gym. And so if that sounds fun for you, if you think you could use some extra support, some extra attention, if you want to stop feeling kind of alone running your business and want a little camaraderie, a little friendship, some peers to work with and collaborate with, that's what we do in Unicorn Society. That's what we do. It's the number one reason people join this group is because they want to have people to work with. It could be kind of lonely at the top. It's a cliche, but it's true. As a manager and leader of your organization, you often don't have people you can confide in and collaborate with. And so Unicorn Society provides a bunch of thought partners in the form of me, Mark, and Pete, and thought partners in the form of all the rest of your members who are available to you to serve as a sounding board and a support system. So the reason I'm coming on to tell you is right now on the podcast is that early bird enrollment is open right now, and it ends November 7th. So if you enroll before November 7th, you get a lot of cool things. You save, I think, $1,800 on your dues for the year. So that's huge savings. We really marked down early bird pricing. You also get a free month. You get to start early. So if you enroll by November 7th, you get to start in December, a whole month before the year begins. Everyone who rolls past the early bird period won't start until January. So starting in December means you really get to hit the ground running. So anyway, go to our website, businessforunicorns.com, click the link below, and come join us. There's an application process, of course, to make sure that we're the right fit for you and you're the right fit for us. But go apply. Even if you're curious about it, there's no commitment in the application process. So just go do it so we can have a conversation. If you have any questions, just let us know. Email me, michael@businessforunicorns.com or mark@businessforunicorns.com. Thanks for letting me share this information. I hope you all join me. It's a blast and we have a ton of fun together. So don't be shy. Let's do this. Bye. Hello, my friends. I have today for you a brand new interview, and I'm speaking with Kelly Edwards. Kelly is the founder of an organization called localhoops.org, and Local Hoops is really a youth athlete program focused on basketball that's been around for years, and I was so excited to have Kelly on the podcast because how many of you listeners have brick and mortar training studios, and you have youth athlete programs, and I couldn't think of like a single time when we've talked about youth athlete programs in this podcast. So I thought I'd do one just for all of you. So if you have a youth athlete program, this is going to be a great way to brush up on what you're doing and learn from Kelly's vast experience. And if you've thought about having a youth athlete program or something like that, this will also be really useful because we cover topics that are adjacent to that as well. We talk some big picture things first. We talk a little bit about what it means to really lead your business with high integrity and a strong attention to detail. It's something that Kelly thinks is really one of his strong suits, and we talk a little bit about how he does that, how he executes in that way. We also talk broadly about kind of financial literacy and how it's one of the things that he and I both agree is just so important if you're going to be an entrepreneur or business owner, and that you really have some strong sense of how to manage the money in your business, which Kelly admits was not always a strong suit of his, but he's really learned to wrap his arms around it, and he gives some really great tips for all of you. And then we walk through how he runs his program, how he finds his youth athletes, how he onboards them, how he coaches them, how he keeps keeps them, how he manages the parents in all of that. And so for those of you who run programs or have a youth athlete program or want to someday, it's a fantastic podcast. If you just want to hear a great story about a really compelling, smart, driven entrepreneur, you'll also love it. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Kelly Edwards. Well, hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. I'm excited to be with you all today, so thanks for joining me. And I'm here with a really special guest, someone who I'm just meeting for the first time, Kelly Edwards. You have just heard his bio, so I won't tell you all that. But as you know, he's the founder and CEO of Local Hoops. And I really wanted to have him on the podcast today because I know many of you listening to this podcast and watching us on YouTube, you have youth athlete programs in your gyms, or you've been thinking about adding them. And we don't talk about that much on the podcast. And that's exactly what Kelly does. So I'm so excited to have him and have a conversation about how he does what he does. So without further ado, let's welcome Kelly to the podcast. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm so glad we got a chance to connect. I'm just excited to get to know you and your business. So I really appreciate you doing this.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So to get everyone started, just tell our listeners a little bit about what is Local Hoops, what do you do there, and just talk a little bit about, how things work.
Right. Yeah. So Local Hoops is a basketball training academy. We're based out of Seattle, Washington area. We are a diverse basketball club. We offer different levels, not just the complete or the competitive AAU level, which most clubs do. We have 3 different sectors. So we have our AAU teams that will travel, across the country and play against some of the best competition. And our top athletes, eventually, once they get to high school, will be able to play in front of college coaches and try to earn a scholarship. And then we have our intermediate level, which is our in-house league. And that's where they're not quite ready for top level competitions, more like school level and select ball. And then we have our development league, which is our athletes just learning basketball, getting foundational skills and drills. So in March will be our 10-year anniversary. And our main priority has been not necessarily getting boys and girls to the NBA and WNBA, but really we're teaching life lessons through the game of basketball.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well said, my friend. That's amazing. And congrats. 10 years is a big deal.
It is.
Right? That is a big deal. So, just briefly thinking back to when you started this 10 years ago, what made you start it?
So long story short, I graduated college in 2011 from Lewis and Clark in Portland. And I had the dreams of going to the NBA and playing professional. And Lewis and Clark was a Division III school. So my plan first was to go to overseas to Adelaide, Australia. And long story short, that didn't end up working out. And I still needed something that I knew I didn't want to get an office job right away. And I wanted to do something still around the game of basketball. And I wasn't quite sure. And I started working with kids and went from 3 to 30 and then 30 to 300. So it went fairly quick within probably 3 months. I'm from Bellevue, so I knew a lot of the kids and a lot of the people that had gyms, and my coaches that coached me in the past still lived here. So it was a good timing.
Yeah, good for you. That's amazing. Yeah. So, one of my favorite questions I ask guests before we start recording the podcast is kind of, what do you think your superpowers are? And I would love to chat about yours briefly because you wrote 2 really great things. One is an extreme attention to detail, and the other was really having high integrity. And
right.
I love these both as skills. Can you just talk a little bit about, when you talk about having great attention to detail, just talk about what do you mean by that, and how does that serve you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I think attention to detail comes from a certain standard of excellence. So I think if you know exactly what you want, and some of that came from me, when you're a highly competitive basketball and you're trying to eventually get to the point where you're trying to play at the professional level, then you rep things until you get perfection, essentially, realizing that you're never going to be the perfect player, the perfect person, perfect athlete, whatever that is. But once that's ingrained in you, that doesn't go away. Right. So you then take that to other areas of your life. You try to anyway. And so when I look at things and I know they need to be done a certain way, we rep that and that's on the court and off the court. So we rep that until it's done the right way, where most people will move on when they're 90-ish% right. That's good enough. Right now, we stay with it until we're 110%. Know exactly that you have it. You can teach it to someone else. Now we'll move on. So those things, if you run a business like that, then you have the most secure foundation, right? You look at a lot of businesses that crumble, especially, during COVID was a great example. The businesses that crumbled most of the time, even the brick and mortars, were the ones that didn't have a super solid concrete foundation, right? And
Yep.
what happens is when you're first building the building blocks, whether that's relationships with your employees, whether that's your relationships with your loyal customers, whether that's relationships with your community, relationships with the people that allow you to do business in their city, whatever that is, if you don't have a concrete foundation there, then when stuff hits the fan, then that's going to show.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
So I
Yeah.
think that was a huge part of it. And then also, it's recognizable for the people who are your customers, people who you serve, right? When they see that, the product that they're getting is thoroughly repped, washed, rinsed, and repeated over and over and over again, they love that, right? Because there's no stone that gets unturned. So they know that when we're getting this job done, it's very clearly broken down. They know this isn't their first time doing it. They know that they're going to get a high standard of excellence when they get there, whether their kid, regardless of what level their kid is at. So
Yeah. Really well said, Kelly. I think one of the things that it was making me think of as you were talking was my background isn't in sports, but in the arts. I was a dancer and performer for a long time. And one of the things that sports and dance have in common is this utter kind of respect for practice, right? This the repetition. Just like you put in the hours and you do it again and again and fucking again, excuse my language, until it's right, until it's like in your bones and you can't get it wrong. And I know that we talk about those kind of mantras, like just practice, you can't get it wrong in entrepreneurship. But I think there's something in sports and dance, and I'm sure other places too, where that you really feel that in your bones. And I love the idea of bringing that kind of self-discipline, that standard of excellence to business. Because you're right, so many people stop when it's good enough. They stop when they feel like, oh yeah, we kind of got this. They'll role play a customer interaction once or twice. Like, well, we did it. We can check that off the box.
Right.
And it's like, well, did you do it enough so that you'll never get it wrong again?
Exactly.
Or getting it wrong will be so rare, it'll be an exception.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure. That's a huge separating factor that people don't realize that until it's too late.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Then we realize, oh, we keep getting this wrong. Well, it's like, well, how much did you practice it in the first place?
Exactly.
How much time did you put in? And there's so much, I think, attention putting on like just like ready, fire, aim. Just like get something out there, minimum viable product. And I think that works in some industries. But in our industry, where it's about relationships and creating an experience for people, I don't think you can get away with that. Right. And it's different if you're designing a toaster, maybe. Well, probably don't want to put on a crappy toaster either, but you get the idea. But for us, it's not the same. I think the same thing applies to having high integrity. I think that's a very similar kind of vibe. So talk to me a little bit about what makes having really high integrity in your business matter.
So you're going to make mistakes no matter how prepared you are, right? But the mistakes that you want to live with are ones that that you thought about and you trusted that I'm going to live with this decision because it's the right to do. And if we end up getting burned or we lose, quote unquote, then it is what it is, right? But when you try to kind of your morals and your integrity to win, quote unquote, and then you lose anyway, now it's even worse. So we've tried to diversify our academy enough to where we have offerings for everybody, but our statement, goals, and the way we do things may not be for everybody, and we're fine with that, right? When you try to serve everyone and make everyone happy is where you start to change who you are as a program and for us as an academy. So, we have certain things that don't do, you know what I mean? There's certain people in this industry that may kind of, recruit or talk about other programs or just kind of do different things like that. And we have a very tunnel vision way of doing things. And we've been doing it for 10 years come March. And we're very successful at it, right? And we all sleep well at night knowing that we didn't have to kind of sneak our way to where we're at, right? So, and we also goes back to the integrity, right? Like there's no thing you can look up on local hoops that can make us, somebody found that out. You know what I mean? So when you build it the right way, it makes you untouchable. You know what I mean? If something bad is going to happen, then you own it and it's recognized as an honest mistake. You fix it and move on.
Yeah, really well said. I think what I'm hearing you say in that is really just kind of knowing who you are. Knowing who you are as a person, I'm sure feeds into knowing who you are as a business and a community and a culture. And when you can be firm in knowing who you are and presenting that to the world consistently
For
over,
sure.
in your case, 10 years,
For
that
sure.
goes a long way to having a foundation of people knowing you and having a reputation for being consistent and being know who you are. My question for you though is how do you balance that? Because what I'm hearing in that is also like, we're kind of trying to stay the same in many ways, right? We're trying to like lead with the same kind of integrity today that we had 10 years ago. And I think sometimes that can get mixed up with not willing to change when you need to. So
Mhm.
how do you balance that, right? How do you balance like, our values and beliefs are the same and we want to show up with the same kind of integrity we had 10 years ago with the fact that some things in our business needs to constantly change,
For sure.
right? How we run programming, how we sell, how we market. And so how do you balance those two things?
So staying the same and being consistent is two different things, right? So staying the same is kind of a, refusing to adapt to the times. And I think that what makes us continually successful is our progression and innovation, right? So we're just because we're consistent doesn't mean we think we know everything and think our academy is perfect. We're always looking for ways to change within our current moral system, right? As long as it stays within. And that's kind of what I tell my athletes, right? Like, I want you to improvise within the offense, just stay within the offense, right? If our offense, it tells there's a 5-out spacing and, you start to go to 4-out and you start shooting shots from half court, that's not within the offense, right? But if you feel you have an opportunity within the ball movement that we're doing, go do it. Same thing, and I like to empower my leaders, right? We have our admin team, we have our leaders of departments, we have our coaches, then we have our interns, right? So we try to lead from the bottom, and I'll be lying if I told you that every great part of local hoops came from me, right? So we want to empower people within the academy to bring ideas, and there's a bunch of people as you get to become their prominence and you get big, everybody's going to tell you how to run your stuff.
Yep.
But quite frankly, we want that feedback, right? So a lot of people run from surveys or they'll run from feedback because people a lot of times want to hear what they're doing well, and they don't like hearing what they don't do well. But if you hear consistent messages from people of different backgrounds that aren't connected to each other in terms of things they don't like in your academy, your business, or whatever, you need to pay attention to that. And a lot of people pay lots of money to know that type of stuff, and some people turn down that information for free. So you have to stay consistent and don't change your message from a standpoint. But if there's certain things that could align differently and provide a better experience, you have to listen to that.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, Kelly. I mean, all our listeners will know that one of my, favorite topics on this podcast is feedback from clients, feedback from our team, keeping those lines of communication open so that you can learn and grow from both your wins and from your mistakes. And so I want to talk just maybe a little bit more tactically about how you do these things, because right now, we're having this conversation like 5,000 feet in the air. I want to talk tactically about how do you actually teach and maintain a kind of a culture in your business. So how do you teach and maintain a set of values on your team? How do they know what the values are? How do you keep them real on a regular basis? Because many of our listeners, I hear, and clients I work with all the time, they know they're supposed to have a mission statement or values or a vision, but they often feel really abstract. So what do you do to make those ideas kind of real for your team on a regular basis?
So I think you have to live it, right? As much as kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. So adults do the same thing from leadership, right? So you can tell them, you have to do this and you have to do this. But when you're on the ground with the kids that they work with, you're showing them the way to interact with, showing them the way to interact with their parents. And as much as, parents can be sometimes a detriment in youth sports, you need parents to be supportive at home, supporting your goal, and you're on being in alignment, even if they don't necessarily agree with what you're doing X's and O's all the time. They don't understand the offense, the substitutions, whatever. They have to be on your side from understanding the long-term vision, right? So it's not that you can completely keep them in the dark. You want them to understand it, and I don't expect you to agree with everything, but you need to understand that I'm here for your kid. I give up my time on my weekends away from my family and my children to help your children. So let's start there, right?
Yeah. Well, I also like what you initially said also was, which is also, it's about our behaviors, right? So the way we teach and reinforce our values is through what we do. So I think, as a leader, the thing I hear in that is making sure that all the ways you do the work, all your standard operating procedures, how you hire, how you fire, all of those things, that they're aligned with the values, that your values are kind of woven into those processes. And I think that's what makes a culture. But I love that you're saying that. And also when it comes to youth athletes, the importance of including parents in creating that foundation of values has got to be crucial.
For sure. And quite frankly, I hire based off character rather than really basketball acumen. So, I mean, I can teach coaches for the most part offenses. And if you have any type of basketball background, I can teach you our sets, right? They're not super complicated, but I can't teach you how to be a woman, right? So if I trust your value and you enjoy working with kids, that's 90% of the battle.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well said. I guess one more question on this, and then I'm going to move on. But on the flip side, we're talking about kind of innovation and continuing to like reinvent yourself and be open to changing the way you do things as a business. How do you kind of, empower your team or inspire your team to be creative and innovative? How do you inspire them to come to you with new ideas and think of ways of improving things? How do you make that happen?
Constantly asking for feedback and then writing that in their job description almost, right? Like you have to understand that part of your job description and part of your paycheck is innovation, right? So that you're not just here from a coaching standpoint, from an admin standpoint, from a department leader, director standpoint. You have to be bringing ideas. And a lot of times when you employ or you work with natural leaders, they want their ideas heard anyway. So real leaders are quiet, right? And whether they may like to deliver those messages electronically or text message or vocally or however they want to do it, they want their ideas heard. So that hasn't been too much of an issue for us. I've got a group of leaders that are very vocal and they don't mind. But leader standpoint too, I've had to remove people from certain roles that don't listen to direction of their own. Right. So a huge part of being a leader is being a great follower first. You know what I'm saying? So if people don't feel like they can bring you stuff, then the ideas that you're asking for are going to come and you ask, oh, well, no one ever told me that. Well, you're not approachable, right? Or you're shutting people down, you're defensive, right? So you have to learn how. I've heard 1,000 of terrible ideas before, but you couldn't tell that on my face when you're telling me that, right? You have to have that blank slate of like, okay, thank you for bringing that to me. I'll think about that. Because that's the respectful way to handle it. But if I were to look at them like this and tell them that's a stupid idea, they'll never come to me again, right? And you're going to have 10 stupid ideas, but you really only need that one good idea to move forward and change your business, right? So you want constant ideas and ideas on ideas. You're going to have way more bad ideas than good ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. Really well said, Kelly. I think there were so many great takeaways for listeners. So I hope you all were taking notes. I mean, the things I heard that really stood out is one, as a leader, you want to be, silent more than you're talking. You want to listen more than you speak. You want to be constantly asking for feedback. You want to be including in people's job descriptions that your job is to innovate. Your job is to improve our systems. Your job is to make this business better. And I think setting that expectation from the beginning is critically important. And the last thing you shared, I think is huge, is that your reaction to feedback has to be one of thank you so much for bringing me this feedback, whether you think it's the most brilliant idea or the dumbest damn thing you ever heard. And if you don't have a positive reaction, like you just said, Kelly, you're not going to ever get any feedback from that person again. So yeah, it's all really well said. That's gold. Thank you.
For sure.
I wanted to pause for a second. That last bit, there was a little bit of breakup. I don't know if you need to change your Wi-Fi again, but you were breaking up a little bit during that last section.
Okay.
I'm not sure. You seem better now, so I just wanted to flag it in case there's anything that can be done.
I didn't see anything on my end. I moved to like a Google Chrome thing. So
okay, great, awesome. We'll have a second of silence, then I'll start talking again.
Okay.
Cool. So let's switch gears. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the mechanics of the business, because a lot of folks that I work with that have youth athlete programs or want to have youth athlete programs, I want to just kind of walk through the kind of stages of the youth athlete experience and just talk a little bit how you do it, starting with finding athletes. So marketing and selling and getting athletes in. I know, oftentimes I hear about partnerships here with schools or other teams. I hear about the importance of including parents in the marketing and selling process. So talk to me about, like, what lessons have you learned about how to consistently draw in new leads and new youth athletes over these years?
Yeah. So we have actually intentionally not marketed the traditional ways, right? So we've grown our business organically through word of mouth, and we've never, paid for Google ads or, on Yelp and, did stuff like that. We've definitely done, marketing on social media and whatnot in terms of telling people when tryouts are or, events and stuff like that. And when we build a following that way. But we feel like organic marketing and reach and word of mouth, parents in the youth industry in general, in our area anyway, but I'd imagine across the country, they're going to talk about good things that are for their children, right? And then that's how kind of, if you do right by people, that's we feel is the most organic reach. Instead of people kind of just hearing about stuff with no background on it, nobody that they trust to, get in background information, and they come in and they not really bought in, right? Because when you come into new scenarios, it's never always sweet, especially in a competitive environment. You're going to be pushed, they're going to be held to a certain standard, and people from different backgrounds, this may be their first time ever really being pushed this hard, right? So if you come in and don't really know any long-term vision, and we don't know you, and you're one of 400 new kids that we're working with right now, right? Then you may just leave when it gets tough, instead of kind of understand, oh, this is a part of the process. I've heard from Jenny or whatever, and they said that this is, something to go through. Keep pushing through, right? Because in order to get change, you have to go through uncomfortability, right? And then some kids and parents don't understand that all the way, especially if this is their first introduction to competitive sports. But that's, in a nutshell, really what we focus on. We focus on the product instead of marketing. Again, going back to recruiting, we're not a fan of kind of recruiting and pulling people from other clubs. And we feel like if you're happy where you're at, great. If not, we're happy to tell you what we do, but I don't go to kids and say, oh, I promise you're going to start here and you're going to be this guy and this guy. That's just not what I do. I just don't believe in it. But what we've had to adapt to is, because we've been against the recruiting side, we have also fallen short sometimes in terms of making our good players feel important and valued and that they can develop and grow here. We've kind of taken the approach of, hey, we're going to keep on doing what we're doing. And, we assume that how much we love you and valued you are. Whereas if, you hear the other clubs and they're in your ear and say, oh, you're great and you do this or this. We've had players leave because they kind of wanted that they got that fool's gold of just kind of that new person in their ear, right? So we've changed some of our approaches in terms of just constant check-ins with people on, hey, just so you're doing great, right? You're doing well here. You're doing well. You're a priority for us. We feel you can play at this level, and we're very upfront and honest with them about what we feel their abilities are. But we're making sure you're cleaning up your own backyard before looking over the fence. So that's been a big part for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I think I'm hearing is that a lot of your offense in terms of sales really comes in good defense, really making sure that your product and experience is great, that you're doing constant check-ins with people that you are working with, making sure they're having a good time. And I think that's a great way to focus, especially for businesses that often probably have a ton of referrals. I imagine kids tell kids, parents tell parents. And so if you can keep them really happy and be a meaningful part of their lives, then I imagine a lot of that work gets done for you. So just out of curiosity, then right now, where do most people come from? How do new people find you right now if you're not actively marketing in the traditional ways?
So we've got about an 80% retention rate. We're about 80-20 each season. So we have different tryouts, about 4 different tryouts throughout the year: fall, winter, spring, and summer. I would say from 8th grade and under, our location base is like 80% Bellevue, where we do practice out of. And then 20%, you can go kind of north or south. You go north, you've got, the different cities here, like Kirkland, Redmond, Bothell area, and then go south. You got, probably within a 30-minute drive. And then once you get to high school, now it's a different ball game, right? Because those players, if you're playing high school AAU at 15, 16 to 17U, then you're now looking to play at the collegiate level. So now we got people coming from all over, right? Now you've got that range spans from an hour and a half outside of Bellevue, all directions. Whereas if you're kind of in the youth, they're like, well, let me find something that's close, an organized program that I trust. But at high school, you kind of have to figure out what you want to do, right? So it really comes from all over, right? So we've done a good job of setting our reputation and setting the tone in our area, and then that kind of tentacles went out all directions.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of the actual program itself, actual in how you onboard new youth athletes, how you train them and keep them around, what have you learned all these years about like what really works and what doesn't work? In terms of the structure of the experience that you build for them,
Mhm.
what's really important to do in the first, 30, 60, 90 days? And then
Yes,
what's really important to do in year 2 and 3? Like what have you learned that's a really important touchstones for athletes?
that's a great question. So, that's been a recent addition, the 2 to 3 year mark anyway. So, what we learned very quickly is that you have to put all of your plans pretty much. You have to remember parents are trusting you with their most prized possession in their children, right?
Sure.
So
Yep.
this is not something like, oh, well, I'm buying a t-shirt and if I don't like it, I can just return it. So
Yep.
you need to be on your P's and Q's with this because this is child development at the end of the day. So you need to be on your P's and Q's with putting together plans together, and it needs to be well thought out and it needs to be results based. Even if it's not, they need to be development somewhere, right? Character wise, personality wise, discipline wise, or on the court from a skill standpoint. So being very transparent where we live by the mantra of you can coach them as hard as you love them, right? So there has to be that balance of you can push them, but you need to make sure that these are not professional militant, military kids, right? Or just people in general. So you can't just be do this, right? It has to be a balance. They have to know at some point, okay, hey, you're doing well. I know I'm riding you hard, but you're doing well. And then you have to be transparent about what schedules are, right? So, what your limitations may be. We don't have our own facility. We partner with the school district in the city. So, sometimes there's challenges with logistics and gym space and cancellations and whatnot. So being upfront with all cost structures, being upfront with any travel plans. So when you lay everything in front of them and you lay all the possibilities out in front, there's really nothing you can come to us. But hey, we told you about this in the beginning. Before you submit any deposit, before anything like that, is everything that we're going to do. And a huge eliminator of any complaints or issues or anything like that. Oh, we didn't know about this, sign up for this. No, we told you. So transparency, and then the first 2 weeks is a tone setter at practice, right? So this, especially for kids, the kids that are returning, they already know what it is. But the kids that are coming in new, you don't know what background they're coming from a basketball standpoint and what their coaches have allowed, right? So you got kids coming around there, sometimes they're not paying attention, kicking balls, they're talking while you're talking. So you have to set what we call our classroom environment, right? So when I'm talking, you're not bouncing basketballs, you're giving me eye contact because I really don't want to talk for more than 30 to 45 seconds to explain this drill. And then I want the majority of our workouts to be you working, and I'll coach you live as you're doing the reps. Right. But if you're not paying attention or distracting someone else, I have to now redirect you. And now we're taking more time. And it's also one of our pillars of the academy is respect. Right. So at the least, even if you are paying attention, it's disrespectful. Right. So you set your environment and your competitive environment, your tone the first 2 weeks, because you can't kind of go through it and whatever and not have those rules and they'll go implement rules later. They're going to look for your first impression, realize what it is quickly, make their own assessment of who you are, right? And then that's your reputation. First impression is a first impression always. So fast forwarding to the 2 to 3 year mark, once they now understand the expectations, you now have to make sure that you're not just kind of assuming that they are happy and developing and still continuing to be pushed, especially the ones that are live, eating, and breathing basketball, right? You always have to figure out how you're pushing those athletes. And the challenge is, how do you challenge the best player on the team, right? Like they're the best player on the team. They are, their 80% is better than everyone else's, 110%.
Yep.
So how do you challenge that, right? So we've had to implement different programs like swing programs where our best 7th grader may swing up with our 8th grade team so you're not the best kid on the court. Having them play against better competition, different training sessions, that type of stuff is important to not just assume they're just going to stay with you from 3rd grade all the way through 12th grade and you don't really have to change any different programs.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fantastic, Kelly. There's so many great takeaways. And I would say all those takeaways are relevant to youth athlete programs, and they're also yet relevant to all fitness entrepreneurs. Because what I heard you really articulate is early on in the initial, impressions you're making, is to be really clear about expectations,
Right.
about logistical expectations like schedule and pricing and
Right.
how communication happens.
Right.
And then in the first few weeks, about kind of behavioral expectations. This is how we expect you to behave and not behave. You're really setting the tone early on. And I think that's great advice,
Sure.
regardless if you're doing youth athletes or adults.
Yeah. And
you know?
that goes for parents too, right? Like
Yeah.
they sign a code of conduct behavior in terms of like referee interactions. You can't talk to a coach and anytime between 24 hours after a game if you have a complaint or concern. Like they're just very clear guidelines that you have to abide by. And if you don't do that, you can get removed from the academy because you not following the rules can affect other kids' experiences, and we can't have that. So
Yeah, I'm a big fan of documents like that, like pledges or agreements or contracts of some kind. We're
yeah,
not talking about legally binding things. We're talking about expectations of like how we're going to get the most out of this relationship. And I
exactly.
love that for parents, for I think for any client. I even do it in Business for Unicorns. We have a group called Unicorn Society,
For
and
sure.
it's all fitness business entrepreneurs. They sign a pledge at the beginning of the year, and those things are just in right, and it's crystal clear what we
Sure.
expect from one another. And then continuing on the 2 or 3 year front, I also think that advice is so applicable to everyone, is that long term, any client of anyone who's trying to, in any industry like this, it needs to be continually challenged. If I've
Exactly.
been with you for 2 years, 3 years, cool. What's next for me? How do you keep me interested? How do you keep
Right.
improving my skills? How do
Right.
you keep improving my character? Right. I think those are, and you gave some really great specific examples.
Sure.
Amazing. I love that. I have one more topic I want to get to before we have to start wrapping up with my final 5 questions. One more topic. Another thing that I know you like talking about is financial literacy in business
Right. For sure.
and staying on top of the money. So just talk to me a little bit about, broadly speaking, what's your approach to staying on top of the money, and how do you think about managing the finances?
So I always make sure that as a business owner, you have to pay your employees first, right? And the money that you make has to be after everything is handled, and you have to make sure people feel valued. And there's ways to make people feel valued without paying them. Now, obviously, if this is a job, you have to pay people, right? But one of the quickest ways that you can lose really good people is by being funny with their money, right? So, oh yeah, well, we're short on cash. Like you want to give people the impression that you don't necessarily be a cash cow, but you will always be compensated for the work that you agreed to. That should never be a question, right? Obviously the people you work with, right? You're going to have bills you have to pay, whether that's, rentals, whether that's tournament entry fees, whether that's jersey apparel, whatever. They also have to know you're always going to get paid in a timely fashion, for anything that we agree upon. Whether if I say I'm buying jerseys, I'm renting gym space, and I owe you this amount of money for this gym space, whatever, that always has to be 100% crystal clear in A1. And I think that starts with outlining being very clear on your budget and P&L before you even start, right? So P&L is a profit and loss statement. So you have to be very proficient in that. You don't have to be a CPA to create a P&L. It's very simple. Everything that comes in minus everything that all your expenses is your net at the end, right? So you will always want to, and you have to budget for, things that you have to pay for that are, you weren't prepared for. You have to have that in the budget, right? So I think that when you get good at predicting budget finances before the program starts, right? So planning ahead of time. So, okay, my fall season is going to start in September. I start my budgets in June for September season, and I budget in, okay, I need this many kids. This many kids allows us to do this at this expense rate. I'm still going to have a buffer of this, which people don't have most of the time. So now they run it dollar for dollar. So if something slips or whatever happens, now they're short somewhere. I think that's going to be the biggest thing, is that budgeting, planning, and then documenting everything. You have to document everything. Like I can go to so many people. I'm like, okay, well, how much revenue does, like, people just aren't, and I get that not everyone is numbers people, but if you're not good at it, you need to hire someone that does it. You cannot run a business without having at least one numbers guy or girl, in your business.
Yeah.
So you have to know your numbers. What are your numbers with people? What are your numbers you're generating? And then what are your future projection numbers, right? So that's a huge part.
Yeah, I think that it's a really good summary of I think the things that are most important, especially to entrepreneurs just getting started. So you got to start with the basics, is making sure that you have a plan, right? Which means you've thought in advance about how much things cost and how you can pay people. Because you're right, the fastest way to creating a company no one wants to work at is to not pay them consistently.
For sure.
Right? I mean, that's when people's money is really intense.
For sure.
Even when we have like accidents that happen on the payroll at MFF, or Mark Fisher Fitness, for example, it's like I feel so terrible about it. And they're genuine mistakes,
For
but I feel
sure.
so crappy because I know how terrible it is to mess with someone's money.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And you don't know, even if you're doing well off, or the majority of the people you're doing well off, or even if this is a side hustle or people have a main job and they're doing it, it doesn't matter.
doesn't matter.
Right? It's the same. You wouldn't be okay with them showing up late for work, right?
Exactly.
So if they're holding up at the end of this, is any relationship, if they're holding up their end of the bargain, you have to hold up your end of the bargain. And then if that doesn't happen, you have to be proactive and clearly communicate, hey, this is what's going on. I promise this is a priority, is being fixed. If it's not fixed, then you follow up, and please follow up with me when this does hit your account, or whatever that is. Like when you show that, because like you said, I've had honest payroll mistakes as well, right? So if they know that you're on top of it, and this is not something you're ducking them and you're like, oh, well, and you show unprofessionalism, it's the quickest way out the door.
That's exactly it, Kelly. And you also, when you mentioned just a few minutes ago, you mentioned I think three other kind of finance tools that I think are just essential. I know most of our listeners probably already know and use, but I think it's worth repeating, is that you got to have access to a profit and loss statement. You need something at the end of each month that you consistently reconcile with all your bank accounts and credit cards. And by the 10th or 15th of the month, you have a profit and loss statement every month that you review and take time to spend to look at it. Same thing. The other two things you mentioned were a budget. You need to have plan for what you are going to spend, and a forecast to look into the future and predict how much money you think you're going to make so you can appropriately budget for your expenses. I think those three, those three things combined create the start of a really good process for managing your finances.
The craziest thing I always hear is that people feel a budget is restrictive. Like, how is a budget restrictive? And they're like, well, I have to stay. I'm like, who creates the budget?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, me. I'm like, well, so you're scared of being restricted by yourself? Like, if you don't like the budget, then change the budget. You know? But
Totally.
You cannot survive without a budget.
Yeah. Well, also, I'll make the opposite point, which is that's what the budget is meant to do. It's meant to restrict you. It's meant to restrict whoever is buying that thing to not buy too many, or not spend too much on that purpose. And so, like, you can set it to be higher. And if you have a business that has enough profit margin where you don't need to care about that, first of all, what is your business? I'd like to join. Exactly. But secondly, like, I don't know any that are like that. And so everyone needs to have some controls on their expenses, especially when your team gets big enough that multiple people are able to spend money.
For sure. You mean, even the most the cash cow heavy businesses like the Amazons and the Apples, they have a budget. Yes, they have millions of billions of dollars in cash capital, but they still have to budget that. Otherwise, that just all of a sudden you look at your bank and you're short 40%. You don't know where it's coming from. Yeah, that's where my gut drops.
Totally. And I've worked in a lot of large companies that have those millions and billions of dollars, and and many people will be surprised if they haven't worked in that environment how hard people have to fight to get to spend money. Right. If you want to add someone new to your team, you got to fight for sometimes as a year or two to get that extra full-time equivalent, or that extra, chair for the office. And that's why many of those big businesses have those great profit margins, because they do tightly control expenses. And so I think it's a great point. All right. Well, we could keep talking all day, but I want to start wrapping things up to honor your time here, and I want to ask you our final 5 questions. So these are 5 questions I ask every fitness sports entrepreneur that I have on the podcast. They're just about you. It's meant to be kind of rapid fire, but also you can take your time. So 5 questions. Here we go, Kelly. Question number 1 is, what do you love most about being in your case, a sports facility owner, a sports company owner? What do you love the most about serving people in this way?
Child development. I like teaching. I like learning as well. I think the best teachers are good learners as well, and passionate learners. But my favorite thing is explaining something and watching the light bulb turn on with kids, right? And you finally get the aha moment, and you both enjoy it together. And you're like, you get it? Like, I got it. You get it? I got it. And then we move on, right? Those are by far my favorite moments.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. I think most people who are in the fitness, wellness, sports area that are the most successful are great teachers.
for
and
sure.
care about teaching. Yeah, great
Sure.
answer. Question number 2. We often on this podcast talk a lot about delivering a great experience for our clients and over delivering for our clients. So if you can think back to a memory of what's like the coolest or maybe most memorable thing you've done to really over deliver or take care of a client.
Hmm. 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 I don't really know if I have one memory, but I remember I shot this kid he was a younger kid, and his parents told me how much he loved local hoops and loved me. And I still play basketball, competitively. I play in the Jamal Crawford Pro-Am, um, and I played ABA and all that stuff like that. So the kids still are able to watch me play. So I'm not just coaching. I'm doing what I'm talking about, right? So they came to the Pro-Am one time, and I pulled the kid on the court, and I brought Jamal over, and he was kind of big eyed. I'm like, hey, this is a local hoops kid. You guys want to say hi to Coach Jamal? And Jamal put his arm around him and stuff like that. But just kind of creating memories with your network and people that believe in Jamal Crawford is a huge advocate of helping the youth and just helping his community, right? So I knew he'd be all for it. But just creating environments where kids feel special and going outside of your quote unquote, job opportunities or job responsibilities, I would say, to create experience kids would love.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so great you answered that way because I've been asking this question to many people for a long time. And oftentimes the answer is something that happens outside of the quote 4 walls of your facility,
Exactly.
right? It's the memories and the connections you make out in the outside world that
Exactly.
really, I think, create that over deliver experience. So great answer. Question number 3, you have a big and growing team. So when someone on your team does this, it makes you super happy. So what is the behavior or thing that you see your team do that just really lights you up inside?
Relationship building, for sure. When I see genuine relationships built outside of myself, when I recognize that players, whether it's coach to coach, whether it's admin to coach, or whether it's parent to coach, or whether it's player to coach, I love to see relationships building, because another firm thing that I believe in is that you can't really push them to a certain level until they trust you. Right? Who are you? Why are you here? Why should I listen to you? Right? Like, I understand you're an adult and I'm going to give you that respect, but why should I follow your lead? And that before you do that, you have to build a relationship with them first to understand I'm here for you. You can trust me. I don't want anything from you except for your respect. And they tell me that you're going to, work hard for me and you'll listen. So you have to earn respect first in relationship building. So when I see those relationships outside of the academy where we're doing fun stuff, they go to team bonding events, and, I can tell that they're trusting their coach and they go to them instead of going to me for advice, then that's what I love the most.
Beautiful. Love it. Awesome. Question number 4. We covered this a little bit, but I'll ask again in this way, which is this is about lead generation. And so what is your most reliable strategy for generating leads? So you need, another 10 kids to join the program tomorrow. You need another 10 people to come to tryouts. Where do you go and find people if you had to in a pinch?
If we have to, which we've never done that, social media is usually our biggest phone. We try to be pretty active on social media. So I would probably say social media, but again, the majority of our leads seasonally come from parents, for sure.
Got it.
Parents and other athletes.
Got it. Great. So I mean, in that sense, the answer might be like, fanning the flames of referrals, right? Making sure that people know to keep talking about you, right? Because the referrals are often the low hanging fruit for all of us. Cool. So this one specifically asking you to give advice, and specifically the advice I want you to give in this one is for gym owners who might have youth athlete programs. So if you were to talk to all those gym owners listening who do some sort of sports or youth athlete program, what advice do you have for them about something they can just start doing better tomorrow?
Most people don't plan for the future enough. So most people are living in the moment. They're surviving today and they have no idea what they're doing tomorrow. So, we are constantly probably 2 to 3 seasons ahead. So right now we're in fall season. We're already preparing for spring season. Winter season is pretty much wrapped up already in terms of what we're going to be doing and we'll finalize that, the minutia details fairly quickly, but you need to plan for the future for sure. Much far in advance, understand your numbers very quickly or get someone else who can, and then figure out how you're going to separate yourself from everyone else. You're never going to be the only one that does anything in your industry. And if you are, it's too niche, right? I don't have any competition. You don't have anyone else to kind of compete against. So knowing that there's other people in your industry, take an honest assessment of why if you didn't have your bias of it being your own program, would you pay for this? Right. And that's what I tell my coaches. Like, when you finish a practice, if you were a parent and say you were a less financially fortunate parent and money was tight, would you spend the $2,000 budget that you have a month? Would you spend $100 on that? Is it worth that much where I would spend my last on it? If you're not doing that level of work, then it's not good enough. So really be an honest assessment of what you're doing to set yourself apart.
Yeah, I love those. So I heard two things that are kind of planning, right? Get farther ahead, do more planning, forethought. And two, that's assessment of like, what makes you different?
For
What
sure.
makes you stand out? Are you offering something that's really as valuable as it could be if you were to step out of it and ask yourself those questions? Yeah. Awesome. Amazing answers. That was a fantastic final five. So bravo. Well done.
Thank you.
So to wrap things up, where can people find out more about you, Kelly? Where can they go find more about you or local hoops?
Yeah. So social media and all of our platforms is just Local Hoops at Instagram and Twitter and all that. And then our website is localhoops.org. We're always trying to do more interactive things with the community. So we're going to be holding some more as COVID allows. We'll be holding more public events, kind of drop-in clinics and all that stuff. The best way is to follow us on Instagram. That's our most active platform in terms of where we notify the community of what we're doing. But you can always contact us and just ask us questions. We have during COVID, we had to create our virtual academy, right? Because everything got shut down. So we created a large library that we're continuing to add to of drills. So if you have questions on drills, how to work on things, let us know. We probably have a drill for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'll include links to your website, your social medias, all down below. If you listeners, if you go to businessunicorns.com/podcast, all the episode links will be there. So you can go follow Kelly and Local Hoops to learn more. And if you're in the Washington State area, go check them out, especially if you got kids. Go send them to play some hoops.
For sure.
Yeah, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for your time, Kelly. So many great takeaways. I really appreciate you doing this today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Hey friends, before you go, just one more thing. If you enjoy this podcast, you get value out of it, you enjoy listening, please share this podcast, comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Please share it with friends and family. We don't spend any money on marketing or advertising. And so the only way people find out about this podcast is from you. So please do everything you can to share it with friends and fellow colleagues in the fitness industry. We love making it and we want to keep doing it for a long, long time. So I appreciate your support. Go have a kick-ass day. Bye.